Good evening. Welcome to the January 28th remote school committee meeting. I'd like to have a call to order first. Aaron?
Here.
Tom?
Here.
Sean?
Here.
John?
Here.
And Carla?
Here.
This is Chuck Robinson. So the sole purpose of tonight's meeting is to hear the recommendations from the Superintendent Search Committee for the finalists for the school committee to interview. And it will also finalize the calendar. And in also present tonight are Gail Dowd, Carrie Messenger, Dorothy Presser, our consultant, and the Samantha LaPierre, our assistant, and Teresa Arendt, I hope I pronounced that correctly, the chair of the search committee. And additionally, we had asked for the link to be sent out to the rest of the search committee if they so choose to watch the meeting. So before we get started, I would like to very graciously thank the search committee. They did a lot of work in a very short period of time, and I kept in regular contact with Dorothy and Dorothy Presser, and she, told me every time, the committee's great, the committee's working well together. So a real big thank you to all of you for the time. Every volunteerism in Reading is great, and this is such an important role, and I'm really thankful and excited with what your recommendations are. So thank you. Dorothy, did you want to say anything?
Can I just echo that it was such a pleasure to work with the screening committee. They put in, I don't even know how many hours in interviews and discussions, and then, just thinking, reading through the materials, considering their choices. They had, great collaborative discussions. It was a larger group than I sometimes encourage people to have, but it all worked out great. And it was, I wish I could have met them in person, but it was really great to work with all of them.
Thank you. And so I guess we're ready to go if you and Teresa want to walk through the candidates.
Yeah, why don't I turn it over to Teresa for a second? I know that she is here, but I know she also has to get someplace else. So I'll let her make her comments, and then I'll come back.
Hi, Teresa.
Hey, how are you? How is everybody?
Good.
So I just wanted to say on behalf of the committee, I think that it was a great group of people, and I think Tom and probably Aaron would echo that. It was a very diverse group of people, so I think you got a lot of perspectives in this group. We started off with 22 people, as you know. We narrowed that down to 9. We selected 4. That was unanimous for the slate of candidates that we presented to you. And today we had 1 drop out, as I'm sure Dorothy will share with you today. But I think that everyone thought it was a good process, and I think we had a lot of great candidates to choose from, and everybody, I think, paid a lot of attention to what the school committee asked them to in terms of what you're looking for in your next superintendent. So I think on behalf of the committee, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity from all of us, and we look forward to this process. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so you're probably anxious to hear who your finalists are and learn a little bit about them. And I think you're going to have some hard choices ahead of you and some hard work. So there are, as Teresa said, the committee selected 4 finalists to move forward. One decided that there were some issues in their current community that made it not a good time for them to be participating in a search, that they were better staying put. So that was their choice, and their name then is not going forward and not public. So of the 3 that are in the pool, the first one is Dr. Matthew Janger. He is currently the principal at Arlington High School, where he's been since 2013. Prior to that, he was the principal of Mount Desert Island High School in Bar Harbor, Maine, from 2009 to 2013. He spent 8 years in Ann Arbor, Michigan, starting as principal of an elementary school and then serving for 6 years as a high school English teacher. He also spent, prior to that, 6 years at the University of Michigan. During that period, he held a variety of positions and worked on projects that related to school improvement and effective literacy instruction. He also worked on projects involving team building, problem solving, and studying school reform models and instructional interventions. He has also worked at Policy Study Associates, which is an education policy research firm in Washington, D.C., on research topics including, but not limited to, school reform, school-college community collaboration, and homeless education. Dr. Janger holds a doctorate in Educational Foundations and Policy from the University of Michigan. He also has an MBA from Yale University, and his undergraduate degree is from Williams College. Going to the next finalist, it's Dr. Tom Milichewski. This year, Tom is the superintendent resident in the Medford Public Schools, and that's concurrent with his graduate studies at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. He's expecting to complete his doctorate in May of this year. And in that position, as superintendent resident, he collaborates closely with the superintendent and has led and facilitated a number of projects in areas including the reopening strategies for the district, working with community groups, particularly on the reopening strategies and collaboration, and on some principal and administrative professional development. He is also currently an adjunct professor in educational leadership at Salem State and Endicott Colleges. He's also an education consultant. He works with DESE on district reviews and works with districts on innovative school design models. Prior to his entering the Graduate School of Education, he was the principal at Bates Elementary School in Salem from 2014 to 2018, and a principal intern before that at Jeremiah Burke High School in Boston from 2013 to 2014. He also has a background in teaching high school math and special education at North Shore Voc Tech, I guess before it became Essex Tech. And for two years, and he's been a middle school special education teacher in a pilot middle school in Boston for 2 years. As I said, he's currently a doctoral candidate at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. That's also where he received his master's degree in educational leadership. He also holds a master's degree in education from Boston University, and his undergraduate work was at Colby College. The third candidate is Dr. Steven, I'm going to say his name wrong, Zavadrik. He is currently the superintendent in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and he also serves as an adjunct professor at Southern New Hampshire University. He's been in his current position as superintendent since 2015. Prior to that, he was assistant superintendent in that district starting in 2005. And during his assistant superintendency, he also served a year as an interim high school principal. He served as assistant superintendent and interim principal for 3 years in Amherst, New Hampshire. Prior to that, he was a math curriculum coordinator in Amherst at the middle school. He started that career in Amherst as a grade 8 teacher in math and social studies. He also has experience as a high school math teacher earlier in his career. His doctorate in educational leadership is from Southern New Hampshire University. He has a CAGS, a Certificate of Advanced Graduate Studies, in educational leadership from Plymouth State, also a master's from Plymouth State, and his undergraduate degree is from Keene State. So you have, just before the meeting, I sent all of you the full application packages, the full resumes of the applicants, so you all have that. Just to let you know that only the resume is considered a public document, the rest are considered personnel documents. So I sent copies of the resume also to Samantha LaPierre just before the meeting, so she has those in case anyone is looking for them. And we also have the schedule for site visits, not totally buttoned down to the last part, but at least dates for site visits in both directions, and the interviews all set up and ready to go. Before I forget, just I know you probably have questions and some discussion, but we do need, before I leave tonight, to talk a little bit about questions for the interviews. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dorothy. Sounds good. Should be very exciting to meet these individuals. So maybe we can start with the with any questions anybody has for Dorothy. No? Oh, Carla.
Thanks, Chuck. Thank you, Dorothy. I actually just wanted to thank the committee, to thank Dorothy and the committee for their work. I know how many meetings you guys had, and it was quite a bit. I'm really excited about this whole process going through. So thanks, Aaron, thanks, Tom, and everybody on the committee for all the work that you did. So thank you.
Thank you. Tom, did you want to ask something, or you were moving around? I didn't.
No, just Sean was going to ask something. I think it wasn't.
Oh, Sean, sorry.
I was going to basically do the same thing as Carla just did, which was just to thank the committee for all the work. You know, on first glance, these resumes are remarkable, and we've got some interesting backgrounds and varied experiences to look at here. So appreciate all the effort, and I'm looking forward to diving in.
Thank you, Sean. Carla, Aaron or John? No. Okay. So now why don't we jump into the calendar just to get that out of the way. Tom, did you want to put that up again?
Sure, I'll put it up.
This was included in the packet as well. And if Dorothy, you can chime in if there's any changes, or we want to plug the names in or something.
I've already plugged the names in, so.
Okay.
Hopefully everybody can see it. If you, I can minimize certain things so we can make it bigger if I need to. But based on Dorothy's email that we received, I see some peering in, so let me make it bigger so people can see it, and I'll, get rid of some of the information that is. Okay. So we have next Thursday, we will be visiting Medford to meet with Tom Milichewski's team there in Medford. Dorothy, I believe he's going to put that calendar schedule together, right?
Yes. The candidates put the calendars together for your visits to them. Yes.
And that includes any Zoom sessions or anything else, or do we need to give him Zoom?
No, they between them and me, if that's the right grammar, we'll take care of that. So you don't have to supply them. Okay.
So then on the same day, Thursday, Stephen Zadravik will be visiting Reading, and the same group that we had talked about before. Then Friday, we visit Portsmouth and meet with the team up in Portsmouth and go from there. Monday, Tom comes and visits Reading. And then Monday night, we have 2 interviews, Stephen and Tom. With the first one at 5:45, the second one at 7:15.
So can I just add, I asked all the candidates about being in person, and they were all fine with that.
Thank you.
Okay. So that means we'll plan to have it in the pack or something like that, right, Chuck?
Yeah, I'll talk to some people about that offline and report back to the committee.
Okay. And then, sorry, on Tuesday, Matthew Jenger will be visiting Reading. And on Wednesday, we will visit Arlington and meet, his staff, his superintendent, super assistant, etc., and the rest of the staff at the high school and whatnot. And then Wednesday night, we will interview Matthew. And then the last step would be next Thursday, would be our deliberation and decision night.
Okay. Dorothy, does that jive with the agreements you made?
I'm going to trust that Tom plugged everything in correctly. It looks right to me. I do know that we wanted to schedule it so that Stephen and Tom had site visits in both directions accomplished before their interview, which we did, and then the same for Matthew.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Do we have any idea that on our 3 site visits, do we have time of day for that?
Not yet, not
Okay.
yet. I told them that generally the site visits take place during the school, the time frame is during the school day.
Okay.
And if they have a group that is sort of has to be at the end of the school day, that's okay, but it should wind up by, sort of mid to late after, not go into late afternoon.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that, Dorothy.
And Dorothy, that would be before, so on the 4th, we would do our site visit before when Stephen comes to Reading, or excuse me, just looking at I apologize. I was thinking it was the same person. Never mind.
And generally when the person is in Reading, the school committee doesn't really have much involvement in that. They're visiting the different stakeholder groups
Right.
that you've identified for them to visit in Reading, but the school committee is not really part of that. So that's why it works out that you can go someplace the same day that someone else is coming here.
Right.
And I feel like I asked this before, so I apologize for asking again. At what point can we anticipate the SurveyMonkey feedback on all 3 candidates?
So I can get you the SurveyMonkey feedback after each candidate. Well, I guess we want to allow a little bit of time in case people don't fill it out right away. But I can get you the SurveyMonkey feedback that I have for each candidate before their interview. And then if more come in, I can update you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else?
Chuck, can we have Samantha get a copy of this sent out to us?
Yes.
Yeah, before I send it off to Samantha, I'm going to break each of our visits down so we have multiple lines. We can start filling in the times for each of those as well. I was going to start doing it now, but it would distract from the conversation, so I'll take care of it afterwards and send it to her.
Any other questions on this? Carla?
You anticipated my question. Just so I understand this clearly, when in the peach color, when the candidate is coming to Reading, we don't have a formal role in it. But when obviously an interview or when we're doing a site visit to their home site, that is our formal role. Is that
Correct.
right? But we are allowed to sit in on the other, when we are allowed to sit in when the candidates are meeting in Reading, if we would choose to.
Well, generally, the school committee would sit in only on the community meet and greet,
Okay.
and let the other discussions happen.
Okay.
A little bit more with those other groups, a little bit more privately, I guess is the right word.
Sure. Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification.
And Dorothy, just to be clear, I think the recommendation would be that we're just observing those meet and greets, right? So we're not posting and we're not participating.
Correct.
That's the other key part about our site visits is we're not posting those either, and we're not deliberating. We ask questions, we get answers, and that's it for that portion of the day. We can deliberate later on what we heard, but not during those meetings.
I think it's a little bit easier to avoid that when it's a Zoom, actually, because you're in the meeting, you're asking your questions, and then the meeting ends.
Right.
And I also, in the email that I sent just before the meeting, I sent some information about questions and about site visits, just, for your information. And any guidance that you want to take from that.
Okay, I haven't had an opportunity to look at those yet.
I'm not surprised. I sent it about 7:15, so.
Did we want to go over those now or?
No, I don't think you, I mean, I think in essence for the site visits, I think it's really pretty much recapping things that we talked about before. It gives some suggestions for questions that you might want to ask during site visits to the different stakeholder groups, but that's totally up to you. And those are generally, pretty free-flowing conversations. They're not necessarily ones where you're sort of the interview where you sort of have a block of questions that you're making sure that you, like a basic set that you ask each candidate. If that makes sense.
Yes. Anyone else? Okay, I guess, so with the site visits, when the candidates come into Reading, you'll be part of all of those, Dorothy?
Generally, I'm not part of those site visits. To the extent that you would like my support, I'm happy to do it. But we did have a conversation with Gail, Carrie, and Samantha and I about arranging the details of those site visits.
Okay, so that was going to be my question too, is I think it's appropriate that Carrie's involved in that, especially because of her HR title, so.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Tom?
So just glancing through the site visit guide, and one of the things that popped out to me was that MASC will not do the background checks, cannot do the background checks because they're not the employer of potential future, right? So we will need to organize for that, including of any Corey checks or anything else along those lines. So we probably need to, Carrie, I'm sure you're well aware, you know exactly what to do, but the timing and the place of when to do it, whether they need to show up in person or anything else like that. I think we need to get those logistics ironed out as well, or make sure that, just want to make sure we take care of that. All the buttoning up of all the little I dotting and T crossing that's necessary, that's going to happen in this fast and furious next 2 weeks. There's a lot to take care of there.
Carrie, did you have anything on that?
there. Yep. So Dorothy and I and Gail did have a meeting to kind of talk about the logistics, and Samantha and I have been also in touch about how we're going to sort of coordinate to, to really firm up the schedule for each of these candidates when they come on board. So, I do feel like we have a pretty good plan in place to approach this.
Okay, if you need anything at all, just don't be afraid to give me a call, so.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay,
Aaron has a question.
Aaron?
I have a question. So, and I'm not sure even who I'm asking this question of, but once the candidates' site visits to Reading are, once those schedules are set, I think we need to get them out to the community as quickly as possible so that people can make plans for that. The hope is that many people will participate in this process, and it's important to me as a school committee member to get that feedback. So I'm just wondering how that's getting communicated out to the various groups and to the community at large.
I'll take a beginning stab at it anyway.
Yeah.
So the attempt, if it's possible, is to sort of take the 3 days and replicate them, so that essentially the time of each meeting is the same each day for all 3 candidates. And certainly, for the ones that involve staff, that's easy, to get the word out through whatever method you have of getting email communication out to all staff. And we talked about, using whatever method you have to get email or whatever information out to all parents, and using any venue that we can think of to make sure that it's, on the website, or if that's appropriate, or it's, sent to parents on what, any of you could put the information on Facebook accounts that you have, once we get the information, just as broadly as you can get it out there.
So can we use the same or replicate what we did when we solicited volunteers for the screening committee?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. I can talk to Samantha about that.
It's okay if I stop the share now?
Sure. Okay. So
Carla.
Dorothy, yes, Carla?
Are we going to talk about questions now, or are we going to review the questions and come up with that later?
So
That's what I was.
That's you anticipated there. So part of the complication that the open meeting law provides in this arena is that there's no vehicle for discussing the questions to ask in executive session. And certainly you don't want to sit here publicly, I don't think, and decide what questions you're going to ask of the candidates. So often what we do is ask people to think of, submit a number of questions. What are your top couple of questions that you want to ask? Get those to me, and I'll put together sort of a basic interview format for you. I can do that with Chuck and Tom, whatever you guys want to do, and thinking about, how many questions can we reasonably ask in the 75 minutes that have been allotted for the interview. And then also with the understanding that you generally ask a basic set of questions, but follow-up questions are certainly fair game, or questions for individual candidates are certainly fair game. Just if a question engenders a follow-up, then you just ask the chair, can I ask the follow-up? And so that's basically the way we sort of approach putting the questions together, to make sure that it's not broadcast out to all the candidates publicly what the questions are going to be.
So Dorothy, with the questions that go to you, will that group of questions be asked the same of every candidate, or should our questions be specific to each candidate?
You can have a mix, right? You could have a few that are asked the same, because in some senses you're looking for a particular candidate, right? So asking some of the same questions would make sense. And then every candidate comes with a different background. So, talking a little bit more, being able to talk to a little bit more to each candidate about their particular background or what they particularly bring to the table is also fair game.
Okay.
Dorothy, could I make a suggestion / request? When we participated in a site visit in the past, it seemed as if the committee that we were talking to had scripted, this committee member is going to ask this question of each candidate, about each candidate and that kind of thing. If we all submit our questions and do some preferencing for you, could you do something similar for us where
Sure.
we, okay.
Yep,
I think
absolutely.
that would make it easier for us to maximize our time in the site visits.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's the site visits, but we also have questions for the in-person interviews. Those.
Yep. So, Sean, are you asking so basically replicating what I just talked about for the interviews for the site visits?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Dorothy, when is it good to get that to you by?
So what is the date of the first interview? I should have
February 4th.
anticipated that question. So, and today, that is
February 4th is our first site visit.
It's a week from today.
Yeah.
No, the first interview is
the February 8th, Monday, February 8th.
I'm sorry, yeah. The site visit is a week.
Yeah. If you could get them to me by the Thursday before the 8th, that would be great. So that would be February 4th, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be for the in-person interviews.
Yep.
But for the site visits, you need those sooner.
Yeah.
Because the next site visit is
Yeah.
a week from today.
Right. Could you possibly get them to me by the 1st? That gives you the weekend, and then the 1st is Monday, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you would like 2 questions each?
For which?
For each?
I
questions
think for the interview itself, I think you could easily give me 3 or 4, but just let me know what your top one is.
Okay. And then how many for the site visit?
You probably have less time and less chance to ask questions on the site visit. So probably 2 for that.
Would those be more tailored or focused, Dorothy? Right?
Those are generally more tailored to the group you're talking to. You wouldn't
Correct.
ask the same question of the teachers that you would ask of the parents, that you would ask of the municipal officials.
Yeah.
At quick glance, I see that the site guide breaks all those groups down with sample questions. So
Yep.
Hopefully that'll be helpful for us.
Yep.
Carla?
Is now an appropriate time to talk about, after we have the site visits and the interviews and the information from the Survey Monkeys, how we actually go about deliberating and voting? Do we determine how the voting goes, or is there a recommended way for us to vote? Is it ranked? Is it, do we discuss a candidate and give them a red light, yellow light, green light? Like, how does that whole thing work?
Yeah, we actually, I can send you a guide, which gives, just to make sure that you're staying appropriate in terms of process. Not that you, I mean, committees do different things, right? They, the deliberation takes place in public. So, you know, part of the guidance is you want to be talking about the candidate compared to the position, not necessarily candidate to candidate. And remember that the things that you say are public, so hopefully you're not saying anything that follows the candidate negatively for into the future. And, you know, a lot of times committees talk about each candidate, and then there's a sense of where things are landing, and someone will make a motion. Generally they're not ranked. Generally there's not a, this is our first choice, second choice, third choice. It's more of looking for where is the consensus or the movement towards the first choice.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense if there is a clear first choice. If there is,
right.
If there is, if there are multiple first choices, then how do you proceed with that?
You keep talking, and you, if necessary, you keep voting.
So vote, hand over candidate number 1 and hand over candidate number 2, and you know, red light, green light type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, you could do that. You could do that.
I guess I would like an opportunity at some point for us to kind of discuss where we're going, and maybe if we discuss it at the time, maybe that's the appropriate time to do it if it's necessary.
Yep.
Okay.
And I'll see what information I can get to you ahead of time that might help you think about the way the discussion gets framed.
Thank you.
Dorothy, along those lines, and I'm just thinking out loud here, you know, a lot of times when we have an important vote, we will, and a lot of times this historically has been around budget. We will reserve a night for discussion and deliberation, and then come back another night and vote, so that people have time to listen to what everyone has to say, and then they come back and vote. Has that ever happened like that?
So actually, I haven't heard of that. There's the possibility after each interview of having a little bit of a sort of a debrief type discussion. And you could even, you know, right, you have one interview on the last night, you could have some of that discussion the night on the 10th, right? And then before you come back and vote on the 11th.
Yeah, I think that's probably, I don't know if the committee agrees. I think that's probably a good idea, rather than come in and start a discussion and then have a vote, but start the discussion the night before the vote. I don't know, how do people feel about that?
How long do
Sean?
we have in between the two on the night of the 8th? Like, I just want to make sure we're able to give, if we're going to go that route, then we need to make sure that every candidate has like individually gotten equal time. So with Steve and Tom being on the same night, how long do we have in between those two?
The current time in between them is 15 minutes. Very similar to what what we went through just a few minutes ago, but there's time afterwards for other conversation. It's supposed to end at 9 on Monday, and it's supposed to end at 9 on Wednesday. So you know.
So what I was suggesting is not doing that after each candidate, doing it after the final candidate, then opening up that. So that would be that last night of interviews. Once we're done with the third interview, we would then go into a discussion immediately following that about all three candidates, and then come back the next night and have continued discussion and then the vote. That's all. We don't have to do that. I'm just thinking that if it gives people more time to think about things and process things. Sean, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to say the only I'm just thinking through the sort of the downside of that approach, Chuck, and one thing that comes to mind
You
is
always do that anytime I recommend anything.
I'm trying to play devil's advocate here, so we have a fulsome decision here, and we don't rush into anything. One downside that I see would be, once we open up the discussion, we're each sort of, tipping our hand on where our head is and that kind of thing. I'm not sure it's beneficial to then create a window where there's, potential for jockeying and potential for people calling us and making a case and things like that. Like, once we open the door, the decision's in our hands. I think we probably need to sort of work through it until we get to a decision. And, we're the six that are going to, be branded with this decision one way or another for the rest of time. And, that's my only concern. I don't know that that's a net negative or not, but it's one concern I have about breaking up the discussion and the vote into multiple.
That's fair. I can say that if there's going to be jockeying, it's going to happen anyway, regardless of whether we do that or not. I think that. But anyway, Tom, did you have something?
Yeah, I mean, I have a concern as well. I think it's an interesting idea. It's somewhat similar to the process we went through, but my concern is the recency bias that comes out of that, where Matthew Janger in particular would have just been right before that conversation, and we wouldn't have had time to really mull on what he said, consider it, look through our notes, all that kind of fun stuff that goes into that process. So we'd be coming right off of one, going right into the next. And I think there's something to be said about taking a step away and considering what you heard from all the candidates with enough time to consider what you've heard from all the candidates and not jump right into it after an interview. So from that perspective, I'm okay with a short, brief, very focused, 15-minute type conversation from what was the original thought. But I really think we need to spend the time after we've had some separation from the candidates to really go through it in detail and have the right, thorough discussion that doesn't have a recency bias right on top of it. It's going to have some recency bias, but it's not like right after the meeting, obviously, right after the interview.
Okay. So maybe then we can use that 15-minute window between, after the first one interview, the one night there's only one, so we could debrief after that, and then for the other two, we'd use that 15-minute window to debrief, and then following that other one. I don't know.
Yeah, and I would be careful in your debrief to really, if you're going to do it at all, to keep it very, very limited and not let it get into a whole big discussion. You might decide you don't even want to do the debrief. And the other thing I think to think about to Tom's point is that now I forget which day Matthew is coming. I mean, there may be feedback that you don't have yet, or you haven't had a chance to absorb about him until really after the interview, because it will come very quickly before the interview.
Okay, so why don't we just keep the deliberation and vote as scheduled, and that's it. And people will just have to, do their own background work. Sean?
Not that I want to suggest this, but do we have the ability to? I would assume we have the ability, if worse comes to worse, to table the vote on the 11th and come back and hold the vote, a few nights later. In this, I'm not suggesting we do it by any means. I think we should push through once we get there. But Chuck, to your point, if the discussion, if the discussion tells us something that says we all want to take a breather and think about it, we technically have that option, I think.
Yes, we do. Yes.
We'd have to post again. You'd need 48 hours posting.
Yeah,
Right.
we just have to bear in mind it's a Thursday night. We can't post on Friday or Saturday or Sunday, so we'd really be pushing it off.
And that would be in the middle of February vacation week, right? So that was another challenge. The week afterwards, February vacation week. So we really need to.
Well,
we don't want to pressure ourselves into a bad decision, but as long as we can make a right decision.
Yeah, we can post now for a meeting and just to have the placeholder there in case we need it. So the posting thing can be done right away.
So do we post for Friday because of the vacation? I mean,
I would sort of encourage Sean to go with his first devil's advocate point, which is make the decision.
Okay.
I have faith in us.
I do too.
Yeah, no, I just was throwing that out there. I wasn't suggesting that we couldn't do it. I just want to get every. The other question I had, Dorothy, is do you ever have situations where when we're talking about, in that deliberation, when we're talking about a candidate, we're all kind of coming to the conclusion that we want a clarifying question on something they said or something about them? Does that ever happen where?
I've never had that experience.
Okay.
You'll have a lot of information about them, but because, you'll have obviously you have their packet, and there are references that you can call in their packet. There are people who will call you unsolicited with references, and once their names are public, you can talk to anybody, right? If they didn't give a reference of someone in their district that you think would be important to talk to, you can pick up the phone and talk to that person. And then you'll have the people that you talk to in the site visit, you'll have the feedback from their site visit to Reading from the community, as well as the interview. So you'll have quite a bit of information about them before you get to that point.
Okay. Carla?
Brought up a great question, Dorothy. I would guess that we are, or the district, Kerry, potentially is going to check references for them, right? Do Corey checks and all of that?
Carrie can clarify this. I'm not sure you do the Corey check until they've been offered a job.
Okay.
So Carrie might clarify that.
That's typically.
That's correct. Yeah, we would wait until we had a finalist who had accepted an offer, and then we would do the Corey background check.
So, Chuck, may I again?
Sure.
So, Carrie, with like references, would you go and check those references? Like, would you check out their references, or would that be something the ownership is on us to do?
I mean, I think we probably have some. We can probably talk about that, whatever the committee is comfortable with. I mean, I think if folks want to handle the reference, if you folks want to handle the reference checks directly, I think that's probably appropriate. If that's something that you want to delegate, to me, I'm certainly comfortable doing that. So, we can certainly talk about that.
Yeah, and I've done in the past at least checking the references that are on the application and reporting back if the committee desires that too.
All right, so let me, if it's all right with the committee, let me just think about that, and I'll either have Dorothy or Carrie do that for the committee, if that's all right.
Sure.
And then we're allowed to reach out on our own if we would like to for any candidate.
Yeah, yeah, I would just, if you're going to reach out to the places, to the candidate or to the people who are on the letters of reference or the people that are references in their packet, I would just sort of try to coordinate that somehow so you're not all calling the same people and over again. But yes.
But Carl, I definitely want, I want it to be done by a central place. You can do it, but I also want to, I don't want that to replace having it done with a central place, because at some point that would be part of, Carrie, you can correct me on that, I think that would be part of their file if they're the successful candidate, the reference checks. Correct, Carrie?
Yep, so we have a form typically that we use when we do the reference checks, and we can, record, sort of what our answers are, so I can report that back to you. And I would expect that we would hang on to that at least until the offer was accepted and the person, was hired. I don't know for how long, I guess, those records are required to be kept in the file, things like record retention laws. I guess we could look at that.
Okay.
Chuck, I agree. I think we need a central person to do all the reference checks, just for good practice. And then if we wanted to do it on our own, just to answer questions, that's a different, I think that's a separate lane almost. Thanks, Carrie.
Tom, did you have something? You had your hand up.
No, it was all about the reference check thing. That was exactly where I was going with the conversation, so nothing additional.
Anything else? No. I think, was there anything else we needed to go over, Dorothy, or?
No, I said this before as a couple people were chatting before the meeting. I'm feeling really good that we're as organized as we are at this point. It's more organized than I usually am on the night of the announcement. So, you have a pretty tight timeline, and I think that we're in really good shape to be able to carry out all the parts that you want carried out and get you to a decision before February vacation.
Great.
So can I just remind you questions that you want for site visits for me to put together for you by February 1st and interview questions by February 4th?
Yep. Anybody else? Gail's been awful quiet.
I couldn't find my unmute. I'm here. I also wanted to be here to support and answer any questions I could, but I'll be working behind the scenes to make sure Kerry and Samantha are all set, because it is a lot to undertake in a really short period of time. So more so in a support capacity tonight.
Yeah. Thank you.
Chuck, I do have one question for Dorothy.
Sure.
Because it's like,
Sure,
Dorothy,
John.
first of all, thank you to the committee and Aaron and Tom. You guys brought 3 pretty good candidates. I haven't had a chance to look. They look great on paper. I haven't delved in yet. Is this the level of diversity you're seeing in districts right now? I don't, there isn't a woman on this group, and I was kind of surprised because a majority of educators are now women. So not having one come forward surprised me.
A majority of educators are women. I'm not sure that's true of superintendents. And the committee looked really carefully at what the school committee had defined as what they wanted in the candidates and brought forth the strongest candidates that they happen to fit the profile of being all men. That's.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. I think that's all for tonight. Dorothy, really thank you, and thank you to Gail and Tom and Aaron. I know you guys spent a lot of time over the past several days. So, and now we'll hold up our end of the bargain. Thank you.
Procedurally, sorry, Chuck.
Sure.
Procedurally, we will, in terms of the community engagement we talked about before, we'll get the notification out to the community about the different dates that they'll be involved in. We'll get the resumes out to the community as well. They're public record anyway, right? So that will be out there so the community can participate in everything. We just want to make sure that I want to make sure that they know we value their feedback in this process. And that's the reason why we set up the meetings we set up. We value the feedback of the teachers, of the principals, the central office, et cetera, students that are part of it. So this is, it's going to be a race to the end, right? We had a lot to do in a very short period of time for the next 2 weeks, really, but their feedback, their input will help us make the right decision for Reading for right now and for the foreseeable future. Sean, I don't like to be branded necessarily, but hopefully it's the right decision we're making, right? So.
Thank you, Tom. Anyone else? Any motions?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. John?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Chuck? Aye. Thanks again, everybody, and thanks again to the committee and Dorothy. And Dorothy, I'll catch up with you next day or tomorrow or whatever.
Thank you in advance, Carrie, for everything.
Yes, and thank you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you,
And
Dorothy.
Thank you, Gail.
Samantha.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Have a good night.
Good night. Thank you.